Good morning. We'd like to welcome everybody out to the Mesa City Council study session for the 3rd of January. Hope you're all having a happy new year. We excuse Vice Mayor Luna, who is with his family and is excused. The first item on our agenda for this meeting is to review our council agenda for our meeting on Monday. So if you could please refer to that document. We've got a fairly lengthy agenda, so there's plenty to talk about. First several items are liquor licenses and purchase contracts. Under item 4, several purchase contracts.
Jill, there'll be one more liquor license that'll be added for your agenda on Monday.
Okay. Item 5 is various resolutions. Yes, Mr. Thompson.
Just on 4C, I saw that it was on the news last night as well, and we are seeking reimbursement from the campaigns on item 4C. That was a question I had asked of Mr. Pombier, and it was great timing because I guess ABC 15 picked up on our agenda as well last night and put it on the news.
4C.
Okay.
How do we determine what their ratio was of how much the city paid for that versus how much the airport picked up on that tab? I noticed it seemed to be a 50-50 breakdown, but then the city picked up additional costs, I think, for the security specific stuff. But I'm just curious, like, where does that burden of responsibility fall as far as those financial costs? How is that determined?
I think it was kind of in the moment. I'm not sure how that, I think it was just discussions with the airport at the time, trying to figure out the balance of that. I don't know how, John, do you have any, I don't know.
I believe that the police worked with the airport to figure out kind of how they would try to balance those, but I don't think there was any set formula or anything. I think they had some discussions about it.
I mean, this was made on the fly, essentially, so.
And a lot of the decisions were made on the fly because it was just things we believed, that our police department believed was necessary to protect the people who were there at the event.
So with the amount of people showing up, the parking was off-site, and then they determined there wasn't going to be any lighting to get people back and forth. And so these decisions were being made the day before, I think, so.
But as my understanding is sort of from what Kevin said, then the campaigns will eventually reimburse the city and the airport
We are
for those
seeking,
costs?
we have asked them, and we are seeking reimbursement from them.
Okay, and is that typical for, like, when other campaigns come and visit the city, is that how that typically works?
Doesn't happen quite that often. This one, I think, the cost became unique because of it being in the evening. I think the ones before, I can't remember one that happened in the evening, and this, because of the late timing of this, the lighting became the kind of the unrecovered cost. That's probably the biggest challenge. Now, we've asked for reimbursement. We haven't got any affirmation right now, but we have asked for reimbursement. And certainly, in the future, if someone comes to us related to this campaign, we'll make sure we get that payment before we host another one, so.
Okay. I don't have any more questions on 4C, but I do have one on 4I if nobody else has any 4C.
Well, are we good leaving 4C? I think everybody understands. Reimbursement's been requested. Fingers are crossed. We'll see what happens. Yes.
So on item 4I, I'm just curious if we can get more background information on what the Secure program, what is that?
Which item?
4I?
L. L?
Oh, sorry. I have notes from last night. Maybe it is L.
L is secure.
Yeah, I'm just curious what the Secure program is.
No, it's good. Good. Come on up. Yeah. Yes, please.
Thank you, Counselor. The Secure is the access control that's on the door that we used to swipe the badges with. So as we install these on new buildings or need to repair one, pardon me, it's just an ongoing contract for that as well as any CCTV cameras and needs.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I had confused that with the CCTV, but I see now it's two separate items, right?
Yes, sir. It's all part of our physical security package, which used to be on multiple contracts and it's now being combined into a single contract to make it easier.
Great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions on agenda item 4? About agenda item 5. We should note that 5G is a significant item that's on the consent agenda. It's accepting the city's CAFR, or Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. I think, Mr. Brady, maybe at the end of going through the agenda, we could have a
Sure.
discussion, just highlight some of the
Okay.
important parts of that.
I've got a question, not on 5G, but on 5F, the eminent domain. I just want to make sure, as far as the use of eminent domain, do we have any legal issues that we're anticipating? I know that we've had issues in the past, and it's one of the things that I don't necessarily want to vote on if this is going to come back to cause issues for us in the future.
Right, no.
So, good morning, Mayor, Councilmember Whitaker. We should not have any issues on this. This is particularly just for small strips of right-of-way and easements for a road project, which have been determined to be public necessity or public need, and so we shouldn't have any issues at all here.
So it's just the easement, it's not actually the proper,
Yeah, we're just taking a bit of right-of-way and slivers and easements. So these are not like total takes or full property takes at all. These are just small slivers of property, and these are generally considered by the courts as public need. But I also want to emphasize, when we do eminent domain for road projects, we're doing this more as a scheduling tool. This project is federally funded, and so we have to submit to ADOT by May of this year to get our federal funding approved and obligated. And so what we do is we will request the use, and then we continue to negotiate. We very seldom end up in court. I think on light rail, we did something like 10, that actually for all the hundreds of properties we touched on light rail. So our staff continues to negotiate. We believe firmly in getting that negotiation and coming to terms. And then, but what the eminent domain process allows us to do is get something called order of immediate possession. And then we get possession, so we get the right of way, and we can show the federal government, or we can show the federal funding process that we already have the right of way. So it's really a scheduling tool to keep the project on track for funding. Negotiation will continue all through the process, even after order of immediate possession.
okay. And the other thing that confused me on that is I thought the location said Southern and Stapley, but then it referenced the light rail, which is nowhere near Southern and Stapley. So
This is for a Southern and Stapley intersection project. The reference to light rail is only to show you that on another similar large project, we had very few that went to through the court process. So it was just a reference to help people understand how we work the process.
Okay, thank you.
Should we talk, do you want to make your comment about the CAFR now, or with Mr.? Mr. Whitaker. Yes, well, okay, Mr. Freeman.
Mayor, thank you. As the audit committee, we met, Audit and Finance, and we talked about the CAFR and the audit for the city, and that was very rewarding because we found no issues in our auditing for the city, and I believe this is the second year in a row that this has happened. If not third, but at least 2 since I've served as the committee. So we appreciate staff and all the hard work and the audit people who come in. So I know that's very time consuming to make sure that all our financial affairs are in order. Thank you, Mayor.
You bet, and like I say, I think Mr. Brady will highlight some of the information in the CAFR maybe at the conclusion of reviewing this agenda. Anything else on agenda item 5? I should note that I have a blue card from Kimberly Forrest from Visit Mesa supporting agenda item 5E, but not asking to speak on it. So that will remain on the consent agenda and that's relating to the development of a new hotel. So thank you for coming and supporting that. Agenda item 6. Yes, Mr. Thompson.
Mayor, item 6E, the applicants asked that be pulled and continued for another date.
Okay.
No date specific.
Okay, good. We'll work with the applicant on the date.
Okay, great. Anything else on any agenda item 6? Or 7 is just taking public comment on various ordinances. And currently, there's nothing off of the consent agenda. Is that right? If that concludes reviewing this agenda, Mr. Brady, share with us, if you will, please, the results of the CAFR.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to invite Irma to come forward. Is Mike here too? Mike, why don't you come on up? And Mayor and Council, I'm going to go through it. We're not going to go through the whole CAFR, but I thought I'd just highlight some of the pages in the CAFR. So just go ahead and hand it out to the council. And we're going to, I just want to go to a few pages just to highlight some of the results of the audit. And reminder, as was mentioned previously, this is audit done by an outside firm, so it's an independent audit. As Councilmember Freeman mentioned, this is a clean audit. There are no findings, and so that's a compliment to Irma and her staff. We appreciate her work and her staff in putting this together. This takes a tremendous amount of effort. Irma, you start this work, I know you could say today, but usually how long does it take for your staff to just focus on the CAFR?
We really start in July, making sure that all the invoices are accrued in the right period. And then the rest of the staff jumps in probably end of August until the auditors come at the beginning of November.
Okay, so let me just go to that first page you have in front of you. The first page you have is page 8, I believe, of a CAFR. This has all funds, so this is all activities of the city, irregardless of the fund that it's located, whether it's a general fund or other governmental funds or the enterprise fund. This has all of the revenues and expenses of the city. So if you can see over there on the column to the right side of the page, revenues at the top, that shows that the city in 2018 collected almost $1 billion in revenues, $999,496,000 in revenues. And that's important because as its relationship to the expenses, which you see below that number in the column 2018, where the total expenses for the city were $920,641,000. So that's the good news is obviously that the city brought in or collected more revenues than the expenses. And so as a result, the net position of the city from that current, just from the revenues versus expenses in that year was $78 million. So that's, I think that shows the prudence of the city's budget and being careful about how it spends its money across the entire city. The next page we'll go to is, 16? Mm-hmm. Page 16. Again, this helps, this is, a lot of times we hear comments about the city's financial position, concern about our stability and ability to pay our bills. Well, this is a statement of our position, and at the top of the line, you see there it talks about assets and talks about pooled cash and investments. So I want you to look at that number, which is $458 million for the entire city, and then under just below that, or down below that, the next section, you see another one called restricted assets, again, identifying pooled cash and investments. So if you take the $458 million and $131 million, that's a good indicator of our liquidity, our ability to pay our bills. So you can see those are very significant dollar amounts that we have available to meet our needs throughout the year. And then the last page I'm going to cover is page 21. Irma, is that correct? Sorry, I should have taken one of those from you. Did I get it right? 21? Or did I skip one?
Did you want to talk about 19?
Oh, thank you. Page 19 breaks out just for the general fund available cash. And at the top left of that is pool cash investments, again, $120 million just for the general fund. So again, cash on hand, ability to make payments on our bills. We have a tremendous amount of liquidity to meet our obligations on short-term basis. So that's important because most of the expenses and the operations of the city happen on a day-to-day basis. We are a service-oriented operation, and we're focused on delivering services every day, which requires meeting payroll, meeting contracts, and so we have a tremendous amount of cash on hand to meet those obligations. And then again, just for the general fund, page 21, we oftentimes spend a lot of time talking about fund balances. Those are a very important part of an indicator of the city and how we perform. As this past year was very remarkable, and we'll get into the more details of the audit when Candace comes back with the forecast and identifying what happened at the end of the year. But 2018 was a very good year for the city from many areas. Our sales taxes were much higher than we expected. We had our permit activity was very strong. As a result, our revenues came in higher than expected. And as a good management of our expenditures, departments were very good about managing well within their budgets and finding some savings. And as a result, on page 21, what you see is the net result was revenues and expenditures. We ended up with a net increase, our net contribution to fund balance of almost $16 million of revenues over expenditures in just fiscal year 2018. So that's important. Sometimes we talk about in the budget, we planned, anticipated some fund balance drawdowns, but what happened is, as a result of the performance of higher than expected revenue activity, again, sales tax, permit fees, I think those are the two probably largest ones. And then also because expenditures came in less than expected. Typically in the budget, we assume we're going to spend 100% of what's budgeted. That doesn't always happen. In this case, obviously it did not. But we resulted in about $16 million in a net contribution to the general fund, which you can see on this chart or on this table. Just shows that our fund balance, ending fund balance for the general fund will now be $130 million. So it's well beyond, or well within, and on a strong side of our fund balance percentage that we've set for the city. Again, we'll go into more detail about what this means in the general fund and all the specifics. Candace and her crew have to take all of this and kind of reformat it for the budget so we can see how it looks as it relates to the budget, but this kind of gives you a high-level understanding of where we are with the general fund. So I'm now going to ask Irma to continue on some of the more other areas in the CAFR.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, question?
Just
Okay.
a real
Mr.
quick
Thompson.
question, Chris, on page 8, where we have so it looks like, when I'm looking at this, it looks like our total revenues are less than our total expenses until we do the transfer. Is that the transfer from our
Enterprise fund.
enterprise fund? So without the transfer from the enterprise fund, we're actually upside down, right?
Well, yeah, well,
By
we've
31
always,
million?
that's the way it's always been, yeah.
Actually, Councilmember Thompson, the transfer nets between our governmental and business type activities. So if you look at the column that says total government 2018, that's $78,855,000. There's no impact on the transfers to that number.
Oh,
There's an
business-
impact to the governmental activities because it received $116 million, and to the business type, to the enterprise, because it gave the government $116 million. But the net effect as citywide was zero.
Okay, because it goes in and out.
Yeah.
Correct.
So actually, without it, this is the number without it. There's no transfers, actually, right?
Correct.
Yeah. See, the line where it says transfers is actually showing a dashed zero.
Correct.
That's because this document reflects the entire city budget.
Because remember, you've got the money
Correct.
going out of the enterprise fund and coming
Yes.
into the general fund. So
That's correct.
It wipes itself out. This is the whole, if you were just to say the general fund, the answer is yes. When you look at the whole city, it's in and out, okay?
Okay.
Go ahead, Irma.
The next page I want to send you to is page 59, which is our note 8, our changes in long-term obligations. And the two things I wanted to highlight on here is the governmental total bonds payable decreased. The beginning of the year, we had $479,950,000. And at the end of the year, it had gone down to $471,957,000, which means that we paid down more than we incurred for the governmentals.
And Irma, that includes $28 million in CFDs.
Correct.
So actually, without the CFD number in there, it
It'd
would
be
have been
less.
even less than that.
So this is the general obligation bonds, the HERF, and like you said, the community facility districts. Then down on the business type of revenue bonds for the utilities, those actually did increase from $1,256 million to $1,276 million. And then in total, the total line of $1.3 billion shows that the total city debt did go up about $20 million. Okay. And then the last one is a statistical table that's in the back. It's page 125, it's table 1. And on this one, I really want to guide you to the second page, 126, is the continuous. It's a 10-year schedule, and it represents our net position. We are required to present in 3 different buckets: net investment in capital assets, the restricted and unrestricted. And I wanted to talk about the total primary government unrestricted and have you look at fiscal year 13-14, where we had a positive unrestricted balance of about $57 million. And then the following year, we had to implement GASB 68, which was recording all our pensions, and that as a result of that, our unrestricted number became a negative $505 million. And that's continued to be negative and then increased to $658 million in this year as we implemented GASB 75, which required us to record the entire OPEB liability on our books.
So Mayor and Council, this is a recording requirement. This liability is not new. It's always existed. It just has not been required to be reported. None of the cities were reporting it until recently. We've reported it as a footnote in years past, but now under new rules. So when you look across the line of these years, they're really very different reporting requirements, and that's why those numbers are different. The reality is, I think our OPEB has actually been dropping.
That's correct.
But it's just now being reflected on these reports, so it does have the negative impact on the financial statement. But these negative net positions have no effect on our ability to provide services of the city. It does reflect a long-term liability way beyond out into the future, which is, is an indicator of obligations we have in the future. But annually, the OPEB requirement is 20 million, 19, what was it?
About 19.
$19 million. $19 million for us to make those payments each year. As you saw, with cash on hand of $126 million, general fund balance increase of almost $16 million, we really have no concern that we'll be able to meet annually our obligations under OPEB or even the pension. Now, they do put pressure on our ability to fund other items in the budget, but relative to the size of our entire budget and the cash we have on hand, we're not concerned of our ability to make payments every year. Now, if someone ever asks us to fully fund those obligations today, that liability that exists for the next 30 years, whatever, that'd be $800 million, somewhere in the range.
For OPEB,
Yeah.
it's about that. I can
Yeah,
tell you
so
the
it's-
exact number.
It's the difference of, we can meet our obligations every year, we have no concern about it, we've been able to do it every year, it's manageable within our budget, but to fully fund the liability would be a significant challenge for us. It would be more than any bond we've ever issued for the city. So that's just put that in perspective.
Chris, going back to, and I think Jeremy brought this up a year or so ago when we were talking about PSPRS. If we were to pay off PSPRS now, what would that hit be to our budget? Versus, because we refinanced it for how long?
Well, we have the option to make different payments.
Is
Yeah.
it 25 years?
Yeah, we increased the maximum amount of the amortization period of the unfunded liability. Council gave us the direction to pay it off in 25 years, and so we have 23 years left to pay off the unfunded liability for PSPRS.
At June 30, 2018, the pension liability was $193,863,000 for fire and $377,891,000 for police.
It's about
Almost 500 million.
Yeah, so, and then I think OPEB's around 800.
It's 705.
705, oh, it's gone down, okay, so. Again, those are big numbers, they are concerning. You know, I think in this next year, we have the possibility to look at the rate at which we're paying pension. It saves us interest cost in the long term. And I think that's something we can consider. But also, we balance that out with existing needs, right? And also with future projects that we have to consider that we've committed to funding, and the ability to make principal payments now or contribute to the cost of projects upfront versus having to issue or being able to issue less debt. Those are other issues. So we can either save money by paying down debt, or we can save money by paying more on the capital costs upfront and issuing less debt. So those are all the options that we'll consider in this upcoming budget.
Some questions related.
Sure.
So it sounds like the financial position of the city is increasing over the last year, yes?
Yes.
Does that mean we don't have to increase the sales tax from 1.5% to 1.75%, or is that still a need?
So Mayor and Council, if you recall, the council made that decision to add additional positions to public safety, and those additional positions are tied to that increase in the sales tax. So again, when we talk about the increases in fund balance, some of that can be one-time, and so we have to be careful about that. But the assumption of the sales tax, and I guess there's still discussion about how much it will generate in a year, was about original estimate was about $25 million. There's not an additional $25 million in recurring revenues in this document here.
So the excess net position of almost $79 million, right? I mean, that's essentially last year we took in almost $1 billion, but our expenses were only $920 million. We can't use that 80 million as opposed to increasing revenues through sales tax.
So Mayor and City Council, remember the $78 million is all funds, including the enterprise fund and other governmental funds. That's why I highlighted specifically just the general fund. The general fund increase was about $16 million.
And what about the, we're also raising utility rates this year. Does the net position negate the need for us to raise utility rates as well, or is that increase still going to occur?
So those are all things that we'll have to look at in this coming year about the impact on rates. That was the one fund, I think the difference between revenues and expenses, where the expenses were ahead of revenues.
That's correct.
So that's an area we'll have to look at. And really, the utility operations is driven by future capital projects and our need to keep up with those infrastructure. But I think we were able to keep rate increases very modest this year. And so we're going to look at everything we can do to try to defer any additional increases into the future. We are also looking at probably not asking for increases in the same schedule that we have in the past. In the past, we recognize that with the way we do our fiscal year budget, we're raising rates at the peak period of usage of utilities. And so we're also looking at maybe making those, if we were to look at rate increases, whether it's this coming year or years in the or future years, is trying to defer so that the increase, any utility rate increase happens later in the year in the lower use months so that people have an opportunity to adjust to those adjustments. But we haven't made any decision right now about what the rates will be for utilities going forward.
Yes, Mr. Freeman.
I think in our prior discussions that just because we have a lot of extra, I shouldn't say extra revenue this year, the revenue stream that we incur, doesn't mean we're going to get it next year or the following year. So we should be kind of self-reliant and save these monies and use them appropriately, because we don't know what this following year will mean, and some of the forecasts, indicate that we'll probably stay about even where we're at today. But I just applaud staff for going through and showing us these numbers so we can make some financial decisions for the city that are important. I'm all in favor of paying our unfunded liability on our PSPRS down as fast as we can, but we have to be prudent about that too, because at the end of the day, we're paying interest rates on that mortgage, so to speak, and then we've incurred other funding, bonding, even on the CFDs. We've got almost $30 million on CFDs that we're holding that as well. So there's a lot of things we do as a city to make us grow and be successful. So thank you for all your hard work, and I look forward to 2019 to be as good as 2018.
Thank you.
Mr. Thompson?
I think one of the things, and I brought this up to Ms. Kent yesterday, is, on the utility side, the Corporation Commission is going to start looking at master meters and breaking those up. And they're going to either require the owners of the master meters to maintain their own facilities as far as locating, putting the designs down, doing cathodic protection and so forth, repairing any leaks and stuff like that. And that can be a major hit to a lot of those areas that have master meters. They're primarily trailer parks, was my experience in my past. So as a council, we're gonna have to decide, is it cheaper to convert those to all electric, or is it going to be cheaper for us to install service and main to eliminate that master meter? And that's gonna be a major hit on our utilities. So whatever revenue we may have may disappear pretty quickly depending on the decision we make on moving forward with breaking up master meters.
Thank you. Other comments?
Would that be any grandfathering clauses in that? Just going to be, okay, thanks.
I have one other thing off of
Yes.
Mark's comment. Does this, I know that last year, because of the lack of funds, we decided to increase our PSPRS term to 25 years from previous of a 20-year payoff to get rid of the unfunded liability. Is that a correct statement? We're trying to take the unfunded liability to zero in 25 years?
That's correct, yeah.
So, I mean, based off all of these solid financial numbers, does that mean we'll be rolling back and going back to a 20-year PSPRS payoff period and making larger payments to the PSPRS system?
Mayor and Councilmember Whitaker, great question. That's something we look at every year in the budget process. Council can direct, whatever payment they want to in each year, but it's a year-by-year basis that we determine how much. Currently, it's set for the 25-year window, but we can look at that every year.
And what's the amount of interest that we're occurring on the 25-year PSPRS?
So they currently have an assumed earnings rate of 7.4 on their interest earnings for PSPRS. So that would be what their interest rate you're talking about is.
You don't know, do you have the, in millions of dollars, how much interest payment are we paying in excess by changing the PSPRS period from 20 to 25 years? Like, what is that difference?
You probably have to get back on that.
Yeah, I'd have to get back to you on that one and then find that out.
Okay.
So a lot of this discussion obviously will continue into our
Right,
budget
absolutely.
hearings, and that's when all of these issues will be debated. But let me just add my congratulations to staff for a job well done. Obviously, bringing in more than we're spending and spending less than we did last year. And so kudos to not just Mr. Brady, but all the department heads, everyone who's spending less than being very frugal in the way they're operating the government. We appreciate it. And I think this demonstrates the wisdom in investing in infrastructure in this community. The reason that we have increased revenues in permits is because we built a $200 million water treatment plant.
Absolutely.
Had we not done that, had we not invested in that and other infrastructure in the community, we wouldn't see increased sales tax, we wouldn't see increased people pulling permits. I think this all reflects some wisdom in the planning and wisdom in investing back into our community. So, and I look forward to the budget hearings and talking about utility rates and all of the other issues that we have to talk about that are raised by some of the questions we had today. Other comments or questions on this item? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
The next item on our agenda for this meeting is item 2A, and that's to hear a presentation and provide direction on proposed projects recommended from the supplemental funding process for unallocated community development block grant funds. I should add also, I think some people are here on item 2B, and that involves Mr. Luna's district. and he's been very involved in discussions on that item. So because he's not here today, we're going to continue that item to Monday. So we'd invite you to come back to our study session at what time on Monday, Mr. Brady?
Probably
5:15 on Monday is when that discussion will take place. So if you're here for item 2B, that's being continued till Monday at 5:15. Thank you. Liz and Dennis, take it away.
Mayor, council, city council, Happy New Year. And it's great to be here to share some exciting projects that we would like to get your direction on funding with some unallocated CDBG funding. In September, we came to you asking to open up that process. And the process was to ask for projects that we could spend these funds very timely. I'm also asking approval for, related to home funding. We have some unallocated funds there, but we have found that we have some homeownership assistance, which is down payment assistance in need before the next funding cycle. And so we have some funds in there that we would like allocated to provide that down payment assistance. So as I was saying, in September, we opened up the process. It was for these specific activities of public facilities improvements, commercial rehabilitation, acquisition, economic development, and accessibility. As of October 10th, we received 17 proposals, and it went through our eligibility process. They did presentations to our Housing and Community Development Board, and which was scored by them and provided to you in the council report. And then, looking at all the considerations, staff have made those recommendations. And the factors for considering which projects to move forward was really looking at which projects could expend those funds by June 30th, were they shovel-ready, did they bring some leveraging to that proposal, did any of them address homelessness, what kind of community benefit did it provide, also looking at what we had in funding, trying to stretch those dollars, and ultimately that all those proposals met our consolidated plan goals. Based on your direction today, we will go out for a 30-day public comment period, and then we will come back to you once that comment period is over for final approval and resolution, which would amend our 2018-2019 annual action plan as required by HUD. That's all I have for you.
Thank you very much. Council, questions?
Liz, sorry, Mayor.
Yes.
On the home funding, how much is that so how much do we have now, and then how much does that add
So,
as total?
right, so we had set aside, and I apologize, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I believe we had already set aside 150, but right now we have 8 in the queue. That means 8 requests for our down payment assistance program, and so we recognize that we didn't have enough to meet all those needs. And so we thought it was prudent for us to put those funds now to help serve those potential households.
It in the queue in addition to what you already spent out?
That's correct.
Okay.
And we believe the 150,000 will cover if all of those were eligible and could use those funds.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Freeman.
Hi, Liz and Dennis,
morning.
thank you. What's the average cost or the amount of money spent on those?
On the down payment assistance, they can range, I believe, between 5 and, we were just talking about that, between 5 to 15,000, dependent on their qualifications, their income. Thank you, Ray. 5 to 30,000, up to 30,000.
Okay.
Yes.
And again, tell us who qualifies for that? What's the income gap that you
Right.
fit into to apply for those funds?
So the families do need to be at 80% of the area median income, and they have to demonstrate that the mortgage that they would be taking wouldn't not exceed 30% of their income.
And if someone is hearing about this program, how do they go about applying for that?
So our website has information, so if they come to the Mesa website under Housing Community Development, we have information. They can also come to our office directly on the second floor. But we have, we work with counseling agencies that do home ownership counseling, and that's often how we get these applications.
Mr. Yes.
Liz, thank you. I've been a big proponent of first-time home buyers and trying to get people to invest in our community, and so that's huge. And thank you for pushing funding over towards that home ownership. So I think it's a good thing for our community.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. My understanding is all of the applications that we received were deemed to be eligible and worthy of consideration for these funds. And so not everyone got funded, but my understanding is that all of the applicants were told that, yes, that this is an application that's worthy of consideration, and if you didn't get funding in this cycle, we're going to hold on to your application. There's no need to refile, and you'll be considered in the next round of funding. Is that correct?
Mayor, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, because they were all notable projects that all have good impact, we just recognize that timing of this application, we could push it forward to our 1920 application process without having them go through the whole application process again. So, you know, those projects have been notified of that opportunity to kind of bypass the whole submission process.
Great. A couple of specific questions, because I appreciate the work of the the Housing and Community Development Advisory Board. They obviously did a lot of work and scored each of these projects, and some of the projects that they scored relatively low were funded.
Yes.
And so can you help us understand why that's the case? For example, I noticed that Oakwood received the lowest score, but nonetheless was funded. Why would you make that recommendation?
Mayor, Oakwood did get funded in the 1819 process. When they went to further into the process, we realized there was some things that were not considered, for instance, Davis-Bacon and some other federal requirements. So in order to get that project completed, more funds were needed to accomplish that. And so even though they were scored low, it was funding that could be spent very quickly, and we had already committed some funds to that.
So Liz, let me just kind of, so when you say Davis-Bacon, this has to do
Yes.
with they must have been building something out.
That's correct. It's a
And so
construction
the requirement as far
project.
as the wages
Yes.
had to be met. And so
Right.
this was teed up as a project. Part of this effort, Mayor, is not only finding good projects that meet the criteria, but projects that can spend their money quickly.
Right.
And so I think that had something to do with it.
That's correct. And this is a city facility in which we already have the plans in place, you know, the bidding, all those things can happen very quickly. So with the committed funds and these additional funds, the project will be done very quickly.
Okay, thank you again. I support that. I just thought it was important that we explain why that
Thank
occurred
you.
that direction. And similarly, Sojourner Center is located outside of the city of Mesa. How do we justify funding that?
Yes, so Sojourner, like many of our other shelters, often are not necessarily located in Mesa, but they serve Mesa residents. And so Sojourner has presented their ability to do outreach and meet those Mesa victims of domestic violence victims and be able to serve them. And so the Housing and Community Development Board felt very strongly that it was time to fund them like we fund CAS and other regional shelters. Sojourner is really a regional shelter for victims of domestic violence.
Okay. And they, in fact, were the highest rated
Yes.
score by the housing department, right?
Yes.
Okay. Great, thank you. So just so we're clear, this begins a comment period, and you're coming back in February after the 30 days for the public to comment on this, and that's when we'll vote, I guess, to either go forward with these recommendations or make some adjustments. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Council, any other questions on this? I have one. Yes, Mr. Freeman.
Liz, and when does these funds have to be dispersed or funded?
So the projects all indicated they could spend these by June 30th. Some of them can even get them done by April 30th, which is what we were hoping for. So that is the indicator that really was what we were pushing for.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. The next item, again, is 2B, and just to repeat what we said a moment earlier, this has to do with a presentation to provide direction on an auction on city-owned property at Thomas and Recker That's being continued to Monday's study session that will begin at 5:15 in the afternoon. So if you're want to hear more about that or comment on that, please come back to that meeting. Item 3 on this agenda is acknowledge receipt of minutes. Is there a motion to that effect? Thank you. In a second, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That passes unanimously. Item 4 is to hear reports on meetings and conferences attended. Council, anything you'd like to share? I know we all had a great holiday, but it's good to be back at work. Item 5, the schedule for future meetings. Mr. Brady.
Mayor, first of all, I want to acknowledge Nana's been sitting here very quietly, just blending in, and so it's like he's always been here, but I'll welcome him to his first official capacity during a study session, so welcome here. Just keep that side of the table in order, and I'll work on this side, okay? The next study session council meeting, Mayor, you just mentioned, will be on Monday, January 7th. Well, it looks like we'll have a 5:15 start date. And very important, just remember, tomorrow is the last day for the skating rink, and we haven't had to use as much coolant to keep the ice. It's probably really good ice right now, so if you want to take advantage of it, today and tomorrow are the last days that the rink will be open. So,
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Thompson.
I think we ought to acknowledge Tony Lithgow, Assistant Chief Tony Lithgow is retiring effective as of today, I believe, after 30 years serving in our PD. So congratulations and best wishes on your future endeavors.
Here, here. I don't see Chief Lithgow in the room, but we'll all give him a pat on the back. Anything else, council? If not, is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.